Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. If you're listening to this podcast, hello. I hope you're doing really well. Today, it's just me and you. What I'm going to do over the next few months is share some of the lessons and the thoughts that I've taken from both the episodes that we've recorded previously with guests, the people that I meet in the studio. If you're not aware, I run the studio here and I produce podcasts for other people. And through that, I get to meet such a broad, wide range of different people who come in, both my clients and the people that bring on their shows who I'd never really interface with or have access to other than doing this work. And there's lessons to be learned there as well. And then just from the broader experience of living life, being out there, speaking to people, and obviously following what's going on in the world. These are just some of the core principles that come true to me. Because what I find a lot of the time with me personally, and from feedback from you guys, it's quite similar, is that what we don't lack is information. There's an abundance of information out there, and we're constantly consuming. What I do lack is the refined ability to be able to take the important parts of that information and apply it in a certain direction. So me doing these episodes for me is reflecting on some of the key moments that have come through and poked their head up above the parapet for me over the last while. And it's following that idea that Tim Ferriss would have shared, the good shit sticks. So this is some of the good shit that has stuck for me. I want to share it with you. And together we can reflect on some of these thoughts. None of these are necessarily new, but it's more of a condensing and refinement of a couple of ideas every time we sit down to explore and hopefully be able to implement and action these things. So let's get into it. Meditation is something that I regularly speak about, and most people nowadays have probably in some form or another either been recommended a form of meditation for some life ailment, some level of stress or chaos or overwhelm. A lot of people recommend a form of meditation. And it's definitely something you've heard discussed in this show and on many, many other formats and platforms, this idea of meditation. And for some people, it can be quite abstract. For some people, it can be a bit woo-woo. For some people, it's been a life-changing tool and experience that has helped them completely transform the fabric of their own minds. And this is now me just relaying third-party information, things people have told me. And it's always been something I've wanted to do. It's something I've always felt quite called to do, and never something I've been able to implement. Now, a lot of us say, I can't meditate. I used to be one of those people who say, I can't meditate. I think most of us have the capacity to meditate. But a quite important moment for me on my journey of constantly trying different formats of meditation. Recently, I sat down for an incredible 2 or 3 hour lunch with one of my favorite people who, if you listen to this podcast, you might have heard before. You've definitely heard me mention him before. Adam Starr. Adam Starr is a Buddhist meditation teacher. We've done 2 episodes of my podcast together. If you have not listened, I would highly recommend you go and listen to one or both of those episodes. Adam's presence and his energy and his ability to help you understand concepts and walk you through your own journey just by being with you is insane. It's incredible. And I met Adam for lunch quite recently, and we were just chatting as we do, and the topic of meditation came up. It's obviously something Adam is quite passionate about. He's a lifelong almost practitioner. He is a teacher. He's extremely experienced both teaching and practicing various different forms of meditation. And we were just kind of having a conversation around it, as generally comes up when I talk about meditation. I say the same things, tried loads of different things. Nothing has particularly resonated or worked with me. I keep going at it, etc. But I gleaned a very important insight from this particular conversation with Adam, which I'm going to share with you right now. As we were talking about meditation, I was kind of walking him through my process, which is rudimentary. It's a basic process. At the moment, you may or may not know, we're going through something called Prymal 60, which is a very, very simple little reset, 60 days. If you don't know what it is, drop me a message and I can send you over the details. But essentially, part of this process is a space creation process. So creating little pockets of space in our day to be able to step back from the inputs of the world and give our brain time to process. And what I found by doing any form of this, going for a walk, or it could be, we're going to talk about meditation today, or breathwork, or anything that creates a bit of space in your life, it gives you more perspective. And more perspective for me is always a powerful thing. So while describing this to Adam and how I would generally do my daily meditation practice, we encountered a couple of key little points. First of all, when I would think about meditation, a lot of people mention this idea of turning in. So being able to turn inwards into yourself, something that can be abstract for people, but I was explaining what it meant for me to Adam. And when I turn in, I generally imagine myself in my brain. So the mind for me always sat in my brain, and probably for a lot of us, it sits in our brain. So when I would turn into my mind, I would always envision myself, and if you're watching the video, you can see what I'm doing here, turning in through my forehead, in behind my eyes, obviously in where my brain sits. And I would try and exist in that space in behind my eyes, in my brain, what I thought was my mind. And as soon as I described this to Adam, he shared with me this concept that the Buddhism practice would have around the mind. And the mind is not the brain as we would think it is. The mind is different from the brain. Now, I am going to butcher the explanation he gave me, but the important take home from this for me was the mind and the brain are not the same thing. The mind is a deeper space within us. It's heart-centered, so connected to a deeper sense of heart and core, and it's not in the brain. So what he was helping me understand was when I try this turning in process, I shouldn't try and imagine myself coming into my brain and into the center of my head and behind my eyes. It should be more of a sinking down into that heart-centered space, a bigger space within myself. And another idea he used to help me kind of visualize this, because I find sometimes when you're able to grasp these concepts, we figure out that the language we have and the words we use are quite limited, so that it doesn't describe it properly. But I'm trying my best here to describe it for you. When we are trying to be in that space, we sometimes need to start to visualize or to use frameworks that we would be familiar with to try and help us sink in. You might often hear of people, when you're trying to meditate, advising that you allow these thoughts and emotions and feelings that are inevitably going to come up when you start to sit still. You don't fight them. You don't resist them. You allow them to pass through. I always thought of them as leaves on the wind. But a common framework, again, in the Buddhism practice is to imagine that this space, this heart-centered space you're now in, is like the big, wide, vast, open sky. And the thoughts and emotions and feelings that are coming through are passing through like clouds. So you just allow them to pass and be in that space, but they don't dominate the space. They don't distract the space. They just exist in the space and they pass through. Now, again, all of this, if it sounds great, it's not me. It's coming straight from Adam. But when he explained this concept to me of not turning into my head, something fundamentally shifted for me. And subsequently, over the last couple of weeks that I've been practicing this, when I'm doing this turning in process, I'm no longer picturing folding into my forehead and retreating back into the back of my brain behind my eyes. I'm now starting to sink a little bit deeper into myself. For me, it's helpful to visualize the anchor of the heart. I'm coming from that heart-centered place, and that is then connected with all sorts of compassion and connection and things like that. But it's a deeper feeling of sinking into a space. And then when I struggle to kind of orientate myself, I start to not necessarily visualize specifically, but I start to feel the idea that this is a big, vast, open sky. And then as thoughts come in, because they come in all the time, as the thoughts come in, what I'm trying to do is allow them to pass through like clouds through the sky. The visualization piece is helpful, but essentially you're allowing these feelings and thoughts to pass through and you're not holding on to them. So for me, that specific strategy it immediately helped me to change the strategy I took when it came to the meditation. So it was no longer this turn into head and try and figure out where I am on my brain and rattle thoughts around. Now it is this bigger space. It's a little bit deeper inside of me, and the thoughts and feelings are coming, but they're passing through like clouds. Part one. There's more. Second thing, that was a fundamental mistake apparently I was making, which most of you probably know, but I didn't. And again, has had a huge impact on the practice of meditation for me, was this idea of meditation, the type of meditation that I was attempting and that I feel most of us are attempting when we do something like meditation, because there are so many different variations and varieties. So I'm not saying any are right or wrong, but in most cases, most of us, I think, are trying to achieve that sense of space and calm and distance from input and stimulus, and just a sense of being. That's what we're looking to do. That's what we're looking to achieve. That's what we're looking to practice. That's what we're looking to integrate. So with that context, I was viewing and practicing meditation as this really active process. And what I mean by that specifically, you may have heard people advising you to use the breath as an anchor, because a lot of the time we get caught in the thoughts or in our head, and the breath allows us to come back to the body initially and then deeper into this mind, this space. And I was like, yeah, grand, no bother. Let's go after this. And I was actively practicing box breathing and breath work while trying to get into this space. So this is something else that Adam shared with me, that this type of a meditative practice where you're looking to achieve this particular state is not an active process necessarily, in that you're not trying to do a specific thing. You're not trying to do breath work. Now, let's be very clear about this. Breathwork has some fantastic applications in terms of nervous system regulation and things, but it's an active process. And whether you're doing something like Wim Hof or box breathing or any of these different techniques, there's usually an outcome, and it's an active process to move you closer to that outcome. So to lower the heart rate and to calm the overwhelm and to regulate your nervous system. A lot of breath work I would do would be focused. I sound like I do breath work all the time, but any breath work I would do would be focused on that. It's a kind of I'm looking for a physiological response here. Whereas with meditation in these contexts, it is not necessarily an objective practice where you're looking to achieve this right nervous system state. That can be a nice byproduct of it, but it's an observation state. It's a state of being. Remember the clouds and the thoughts. It's not trying to stop the thoughts, and it's not holding on to the thoughts and trying to process the thoughts. They're different things. It's allowing them to exist and to move through the space that you're in. So you're no longer attaching yourself and reacting to these stimulus. You're just being and you're observing. And that also goes for the breath. So using the breath as an anchor. And I know, like, I've used the Sam Harris app and meditations before as well, and never actually picked this up before as well. The breath is the idea of using the breath is as an anchor to be observed. So a little tip that Adam gave me was just specifically focusing on the air coming in and out through my nostrils. And I was like, well, obviously, yeah. But as I went on to explain what I was doing, he's like, no. What you're doing is you're actively trying to bring more air in, hold your breath and let more air out, or pace yourself or whatever. Just observe your current rate of breath. Observe the air coming in and observe it going out. He also shared with me, a lot of us try and focus on that deep belly breathing. But again, you're bringing yourself back into your senses then. It's a conscious, active process. And I find that when I'm doing that, I'm overinflating my stomach and I'm engaging my diaphragm and coming back down because this is what I'm supposed to do. But again, that's pulling you out of this state of just being and observing. Again, instant. As soon as I was able to recognize, okay, well, this is breath work, but this is just observing how the breath is moving in and out, specifically through the nostrils, which gives you a focal point for this. A combination of this idea of being in space, allowing the thoughts pass through, and then when I'm starting to get distracted or overwhelmed, just bringing myself back to the breath coming in through the nostrils and out through the nostrils, not controlling it, just observing it. That combination, ladies and gentlemen, has been golden. So I went from my practice at the moment, very, very minimal. The idea with the Prymal 60 is 10 minutes per day, cut whatever way you wanted to. And I was doing it in batches of 2 and 3 minutes across the day. So 2 or 3 little sessions of multiple minutes across the day. The first time I tried this new technique, let's call it, with Adam, not with Adam, but advised by Adam, immediately the 10 minutes absolutely flew in. I felt a completely different sensation and experience than I had before. I enjoyed doing it before, but the 10 minutes was nothing now. Whereas before, I would almost get to 3 minutes. I was like, God, was that 3 hours? Was that a half an hour? Well, like that, this feels like I've really tried to drag this out. Whereas the 10 minutes now absolutely flies in. It flies in. And even then, I feel like I'm only starting to get into that real rhythm of being and observing and all this kind of stuff. So immediately transformative. Now, this is coming from someone who intermittently on and off for years has tried all these different techniques and they, quote unquote, didn't work. And immediately these 2 little changes were huge for me. And the final piece, which is linked in with these, is I explained to Adam I used this app which I've recommended on the podcast before. Brian O'Loughlin recommended to me, called Triple Flame, which is basically a very simple timer that goes off, gives you a nice quote and gives you some music, and you can set it for 3 minutes or 5 minutes and sit, and this nice music plays and you're just supposed to sit in space. And again, Adam was saying that's fine for certain things, but for what I said I was trying to achieve, which is this state of being and this meditative state, I'm still too sense activated. I can't remember the exact phrasing he uses, but I still have my hearing is still activated. I'm still listening to music. And some of that music can be rhythmic and some of it can be very helpful to again, downregulate the nervous system. But he reckoned it wasn't particularly helpful for me because it was keeping me in this headspace. I was actively listening to the music and it was stopping me from being able to just sit a little bit more into that space inside. So no music, noise cancelling earphones, sitting nice and comfortably, not thinking about going into the head, thinking about going into the deeper space, observing and allowing thoughts and feelings to pass through and acknowledging them and accepting them as clouds passing through a big open sky, and then focusing on the nostrils and the air coming in and coming out. Absolute game changer. This is something that I would highly recommend if you're looking to work on a meditative practice. If you struggle with it for whatever reason, these are some of the things that were right in front of my face and I didn't even realize it. Now I think about it, it's obvious, but I needed Adam to be able to take me on a journey and show me. And I've tried them, and I'm not saying that I'm an enlightened meditator now. I'm absolutely not. But because I'm doing this practice regularly every single day, the 10 minutes are so I genuinely look forward to them, whereas before they were a task, something I had to complete, which was obviously part of the problem as well. So all of that said, we provided context for the breath work as well. It's a different thing. It's not that it doesn't work or you shouldn't do it. It's a different thing. And understanding that, really, really important. This was transformative for me. So first of all, massive gratitude to Adam. But I think, again, like people like Sam Harris and stuff like this this information's already out there. This is not new information. But I, for some reason, was blind to it because I was working so hard on doing the thing. I got to do this thing, and it became an active process, and then I would try and force it. Similar enough with journaling and writing and things like that. Very, very frustrating for me because I'm looking for this outcome and forcing this process as opposed to just allowing it be what it is. And again, that is a really abstract topic, and that's why I wanted to share this today, because I don't do well with abstract topics, and this was something really specific I could focus on without it being a really active process. I was focusing on being able to be an observer and be able to sit a little bit deeper into that process. So I'll keep you informed, but would highly, highly recommend it. Again, if you haven't listened to those episodes, Adam Starr, get on it. I don't often push episodes hard. Probably, definitely in my those 2 episodes in my top 5 of all time. And by all accounts, based on the literally thousands and thousands of listens and views on those episodes, it was obviously a fan favorite as well. And I've had so much feedback from people and people reaching out, talking about those episodes too. And when you meet somebody like Adam, who is just, he's able to help you see the way through your own path, as opposed to being preachy or telling you. Like when we were talking about this stuff at lunch, there was no, oh, you should do this. It was, okay, well, let's explore what you're doing and potentially here are some blocks that you might be encountering. And he would talk me through it. And then I would realize that I was also actively contributing. I was recognizing the blocks as he was just talking me through it. So people like that I find are incredible. And he's a good friend now as well. So go check out the episodes. So that's topic 1 I wanted to share. If you struggle with meditation, give it a go. I would love to hear if this is not just an N of 1, I would love to hear if this translates across to other people who may be struggling for various different reasons. But remember, it's not about this forcing this active process. Try and shut off the stimulus. Few little techniques to help you sit a little bit deeper into it. If it's visualization and visualizing those open spaces in the sky and the clouds. And I don't know if I am alone in this, but I'd imagine I'm not, in terms of thinking of the mind as where we think in our brain. But it's actually not. And specifically in this Buddhist philosophy, they have a much, much deeper understanding of what the mind is. I'm not even going to attempt to go deep into it, but maybe something I'll discuss with Adam on a future podcast. But yeah, those few little cues from me, absolutely transformative. The second topic I would like to talk about today. Now, it's not a hot topic. This is something I'm slowly over the last 6 to 8 months have been forming a better grasp of in my own head. And I wanted to wait until I knew exactly what it is I was saying to do like a sit down like this on it. It's come up in most of the recent podcasts, and particularly the latest podcast I've done with Owen Lacey at his gym in the ISI. If you haven't listened to that, that gives a little bit more context to what I'm going to share with you today. But that's the topic of healthy skepticism. Skepticism is one of those words that has been, I suppose, weaponized lately as well. To be a skeptic is lumped in a broad way with a bunch of different terms that can be used in a derogatory way. And it's lumped in with something like contrarianism, conspiracy theory. All of these different phrases have very specific meanings, but they have been weaponized in this social and cultural warfare that we're involved in today. I'm not going to get wound up by this now, but healthy skepticism is a phrase we're all familiar with, but it actually really nicely, because I was looking for another way to describe what it is I was trying to discuss in a lot of the episodes. And I actually, at the time of recording this episode, I'm not sure what order they're going out in, but yesterday I recorded with Brian Penny. And from Brian's expertise in neuroscience, he was able to listen to what I was saying in a bunch of different environments and bring it back to this idea of skepticism and healthy skepticism, and why that word very nicely communicates this idea of being curious and taking an active role in our lives when it comes to how we consume information, how we interface with the world. Specifically, I think when it comes to health information, politics and culture, a degree of healthy skepticism to me represents this idea of being curious, being open, and being involved and engaged in the things that you are interfacing with, as opposed to being passive or being led by the nose, which, in my opinion, happens way more than not nowadays in a lot of these different areas. So, to maybe nail down a little bit more, give you a little bit more context around what I mean by healthy skepticism. Skepticism is often conflated, as I said, with this idea of if you're a skeptic, you're somebody who just wants to argue. That's not what skepticism in a healthy way means. There is unhealthy skepticism, and you can tell by the framing of those leading words, healthy or unhealthy, that changes the context of the word. So skepticism by itself, I should have brought up an actual definition of the word here, just for context for us, but unhealthy would be maybe more cynical worldview and a complete rejection of authority, maybe, or a complete rejection of maybe mainstream, and that's into your more conspiracy theory side of things. And then on the opposite side of unhealthy skepticism, you'd have this idea of blind trust, just all in. And then I know a lot of people like to throw in this idea of cluster beliefs in there too, and all of these terms become weaponized depending on what side of the fence you're sitting on. But for me, the driving factor behind trying to nail down a term that umbrellaed all of this was my observation that in every single conversation that I was interested in, let's nail it down to the health conversation. In the health conversation today, there is a very, very clear and growing divide. And the divide is being driven by not objective data or experience or anything. It's being driven by weaponization of language, tribalism, politics, social status. And that's frustrating for me because a lot of the time, good messages get lost in bullshit. So when I speak to people on different sides of a particular fence, let's keep it in the health sphere here, what's very clear to me is that most of these people want the same thing. They want to deliver good information. They want the best for people. They want to help. They want to further the cause of health and wellness and mental health and physical health and nutrition and exercise and performance and all these different things. But as I discussed with Owen, most of those conversations are unfortunately tinged by bias. And that bias, trust me, because I've seen it everywhere, exists everywhere. Whether it's in the social media world, whether it's in politics, whether it's in formal medicine, whether it's in functional medicine, bias is everywhere. So why I think it's important for us to have a healthy level of skepticism is that we need to understand that when we are interfacing with a person, a professional, a body, a culture, a societal topic, in most cases, our best interest is not the same as the best interest of this particular person or cause. This is not to say that everybody or even most people out there are out to get us. It just means that there are individual biases and incentives everywhere. So I feel our responsibility as consumers, our responsibility as patients, clients, as members of society, as family, as friends, our responsibility is to approach everything with a healthy level of skepticism, which means curiosity, which means as I interface with this person or this thing, can I bring a level of curiosity? Can I bring a level of autonomy? Can I bring a level of discernment when it comes to the information? Not do I walk in guns blazing telling everybody they're right because I read this or I saw this. Can I understand that there exists a level of authority bias everywhere I go? Whether that's on one side with social media because somebody has a big following or because somebody has a six-pack or because somebody has other relationships in the social sphere, or in the formal world when I go in to see a medical professional or I go in to see a professional in some environment. In both cases, there's legitimate reasons to respect the person's authority. In the medical sphere, these people have studied and researched and have experience and real life touch points. And in the, let's call it the social world, the societal world, a lot of people do actually generate big followings or do develop a lot of trust because something they have contributed is of value. So it's not to discount either one of these things. That's not what I'm saying. Healthy skepticism would be understanding that that is not always the case. That when you interface with somebody else, there are lots of different nuances. Let's take, for example, the social person. There's business incentives, there's social incentives, there's status incentives, and there's financial incentives involved there. When we take the medical professional, there are biases there that are similar to the social world. Everything I just named exists there too. But there's also limitations of the environment, the systems that they work in, the time that they have, their personal, their professional biases. Again, none of this is to say we need to go in and be distrusting. That's not what I'm saying. What it is to say is that we should interface with all of these different areas with a level of curiosity and a confidence that we can go in and engage in the process. So that was a little bit abstract, so I'll go a little bit deeper on this. When we are dealing with a piece of information that could have an impact on our lives or our health, again, let's stay in the health sphere, and this is what I discussed with Owen. A good idea is for us to have an open mind, to absolutely respect the people that we're speaking to listen to all the information that we're given, and to have some form of personal process of filtering through that information and being able to decide what fits me in my particular set of circumstances right now, and do I get the feeling that this particular person is contributing to this collaboration in an effective way? Are they giving me information that they believe is true, that they believe is helpful, that they believe is not going to cause any harm? Are they giving me some sort of cookie cutter approach to a question or a problem that I have? That's healthy skepticism. It doesn't mean distrust. So there's a couple of ideas around skepticism that exist in the popular world. I'll start with a line by Neil deGrasse Tyson. Neil deGrasse Tyson, you may not know, is a scientist who's quite public and appears in a lot of public spaces. In some cases, I'd be a big fan of the philosophy behind what he says. Some people have a problem with how he communicates, and some people have a problem with some of the claims he's made. I'm not going to comment on any of those things, but he has a quote that says, "Knowing how to think empowers you far beyond those who know only what to think." So healthy skepticism is a how to think, not what to think. So a what to think would be, I'm going to go in here and this person wants to cause me harm. This person has only got a bias. And how to think is going in with this healthy curiosity of, okay, I will go in and listen to all the information this person provides. I'll go on this particular social media platform. I'll consume the information, and then I'll make a decision based off how I feel, based off how they've delivered it, based off how relevant it is to me right now, based off how have they got experience dealing with similar people to me. All these different frameworks that I discussed with Owen. That is a how to think way, not a what to think. I feel that too many of us have an inbuilt what to think. So we have our own bias that we bring, which is an unhealthy level of skepticism. That's a what I think rather than a how I think. There's also an unhealthy how I think there, which is the inverse of going in with an open mind. It's going in completely closed-minded. That's also a how. But to relate it to this quote, that idea, when I went to college, the one thing I learned was this is how you're supposed to learn. It wasn't necessarily all the things in the books that were given to me. It was, here's how to approach a topic and here's how to critically evaluate the information, which is probably another way to have a level of healthy skepticism and curiosity. Here's how to look at some information that's presented to you and evaluate it and break it down and come up with an outcome or an opinion based off that information. So that links in nicely here as well. There's also this idea that Carl Sagan kind of promotes called exquisite balance between skepticism and openness to new ideas. So it is a balanced view. I like this word in this context, this idea of a balanced view. Balance in other contexts gets bandied around, but in this kind of way, you're going in and you're open to having your mind changed. You're open to being helped. You're open to accepting information. And you're also curious, and you've got some ideas that you're bringing to the table yourself. And you've got a good overall view of the topic that you're interested in. Again, if it's a health topic. Now, again, like I discussed with Owen, I'm not expecting anybody to go in with research studies. If that's your thing, fine. But most of us aren't going to read the research. And even if we did, we don't know how to interpret it properly. And even if we interpret it properly, a lot of the research is not necessarily presented in a particularly straightforward way for particular reasons, and there's biases and things like that. So that's not a practical option for most people, because that's what's thrown back into this conversation. We'll do the research. That's not what I'm suggesting either. But going in with a good overview of what the general feelings and opinions on both sides are in this particular space, in my opinion, is a fantastic idea. And exquisite balance between skepticism and openness to new ideas is a lovely way to think about that, because you're not going in as a skeptic, but you're going in with a degree of healthy skepticism. Another thing that you are probably very familiar with, which illustrates this nicely, is in the social world at the moment, on all of these platforms and social media, you see a lot of people engaging in what I think is extremely unhelpful discourse that's packaged and branded as helpful and safety discourse. And what I mean specifically by that is all of this call out shit online, all of this culture of calling out other people in order to further your own message. My opinion on that is, because the disclaimer attached to all of these is, this is for safety. This is to monitor the information that's on the internet and make sure people are only getting good information. And my response to that is, who are you to monitor the information? It doesn't matter who you are, what your experience is, and where you come from. You are free to share information. And this brush I'm using paints both sides. Everybody should be free to share information. Objectively harmful information is not objectively harmful information in most of the cases that I've seen it in. And there's a deeper question here in terms of who do we need to trust to regulate this information? Anybody going online shitting on somebody else, there's multiple things going on here. Number one, what you're trying to tell me is your information is the objective information because it's based in science, which is the obvious argument here. That's quite debatable because, as I said, there's bias everywhere. It's not to distrust any of this. We have to have some levels of trust in formal bodies and formal pillars of knowledge and society. And as a society, there are certain things that we decide we will put our trust into. And I think that's healthy for society. So that's not what I'm saying. But in these environments are not designed for nuanced conversation. And when people come on and claim to have the answer on either side, whether it's this idea of the only thing you should do when it comes to your health and nutrition is natural and healthy, or it's this idea of literally the only person you should listen to is the person with the letters behind their name or huge scientific backing. Neither of those things are necessarily objectively correct for you, because it depends. So healthy skepticism helps you approach that problem, not with outrage, not having to pick a team, not having to join a tribe, not having to engage in this absolutely small-minded bullshit conversation on social media, but it allows you to observe both sides and to acknowledge that most likely 80% of what both of these people are saying is true, unless they're having a black and white one-on-one binary style debate, which I would probably avoid. But most of these people probably have a similar goal in mind, which is to help, which is to provide valuable information. The extra element and layer we always add on to that is they also have an incentive to be controversial online, because these platforms, they thrive off division, they thrive off argument, they thrive off all of these engagement metrics. So us understanding that just allows us to step back and observe and go, okay, these people are getting really emotional, they're getting really angry, and they're really going at each other here. Don't want to be involved in this. I don't need to pick a side. What parts of these discussions overlap? What parts are potentially beneficial? What parts can I take to improve the life of me, my family, my friends, my society, my culture, and the world? That escalated really fast there, but you know what I'm saying here. It's the healthy skeptic, I think, would look at this argument, this conversation that's happening online, would be able to step back out of it and would be able to apply their filter to how to think, to acknowledge that, okay, these people are caught up in, they're caught up in the minutiae of what's going on here. But if I actually step back, they kind of want the same thing. And there's an overlap here. And there's probably something in this discussion or argument that I can take that's helpful and beneficial for me in this particular set of circumstances. Job done. Let's go. Let's move on. For me, healthy skepticism encompasses that idea, that methodology of approaching something. And again, there's loads of different phrases you could use, and curiosity is the obvious one to approaching these, and non-judgmental curiosity and things like this. But I feel that's going to accomplish two different things for us as consumers, as observers, as bystanders. It's going to allow us to avoid getting into trivial tribal arguments about things that I'm not going to say that are not important, because they absolutely are important, but the argument is not important to us as consumers. It might be important to the people who are trying to make a point or trying to establish some sort of authority in a field. Fine, no problem. But for us, the argument is not what's important. The outcome is what's important. And the outcome is going to be dictated about how we engage with this. If we engage in an emotional, tribal way, the likelihood is we're going to miss something out, because both of these parties have something to offer us. But if we engage at the level that they're engaging at, which unfortunately is just a symptom of the platform that they're using. When you listen to a lot of people on podcasts, it tends to be a lot more reasonable. It tends to be, obviously, it's long form. Obviously, a lot of these people are talking face to face. It's a lot more polite and nuanced, and people can go deeper into topics and we can get a bigger understanding. But as I mentioned in that podcast with Owen, most people are interfacing with information now on social media. So acknowledging what that space is, what it does, and how it's not designed for nuanced conversation is really important for us as consumers. And I say us as consumers as I sit here talking to a camera. If you're creating content as well, it's important too to really dial in, like what am I actually doing here? And this is not me preaching. This is just a philosophy that I approach all of my work with. What is it I'm trying to do here? Am I trying to convince people to do something? Or in this particular case, am I trying to share some experiences that I've had? And if it resonates with you or you relate to it, it could be useful, because that's how I've found resources and information that have helped me personally in the past. It's by being able to interface with relatively non-judgmental, compassionate, softer approach content. Now, I fully understand the game, and the game is, if you don't have something that's contrarian or divisive, you're not going to grow your platform. It's almost as simple as that. Very few soft, compassionate messages get amplified because it doesn't serve the engagement metrics. Whatever about the evil overlords, it doesn't serve the engagement metrics on these platforms, so it doesn't grow. So if you want to grow and get your message out there, you got to play a bit of the game. I also understand there's some of that involved in it because I'm involved in that world. However, to bring it right back to the original point here, without me going completely off topic, us being able to bring a skill, the skill of healthy skepticism is a soft approach. It's an open approach. It's a curious approach. It's a approach that brings trust and respect to figures of authority and figures with experience in the relevant spheres. And it's also us being able to stand strong in the face of authority bias, in the face of not violent, but aggressive and emotional arguments as to why we should do a thing. In many cases, we don't know what's best for us, but that's also not to say that other people know what's best for us. In my experience, the best way to find out what is best for us is a collaborative approach. And this is specifically coming from my work in the medical sphere. And sometimes I say work in the medical sphere. I'm not a doctor. I was not a doctor. I worked with doctors. I know many doctors. I was a physiotherapist, and I saw clients. I saw patients. I worked for 12 years in that medical environment where I was directly interfacing with patients and clients and people who came in, normal people. And I would have conversations with these people. I would help with their treatment plans and trying to gain a deeper understanding of where they were struggling. And a lot of the people we specifically spoke to and worked with were people who had been through many, many rounds of interfacing with information or professionals and still hadn't found solutions. So that's when I say my medical experience. It's not that I was a doctor. I have no claims to have any sort of expertise in that space, but I've had the benefit and the honor of being able to speak to so many people who work in these professions, both in that world and in what I do now, to so many people who are patients and clients. As most of us have, we know people who are patients and clients. We are patients and clients. So my observations are based on that. They're based on having a look behind the curtain, being able to interface with these people. And I will repeat this, my genuine experience is the vast majority of people do not have it out to get you. They're not trying to harm. However, that doesn't mean that your best interest aligns with their best interest. That is an important nuanced point to understand, because sometimes this conversation sounds like you should generate an unhealthy skepticism, a mistrust and a distrust of systems and all these kind of things. No. A lot of those things serve an extremely important role in society and in our lives. And I am the first to say, and I actually said it in that episode, if I get sick, if I need professional help anywhere in my life, not just in medicine, I'm going to a professional. However, I also have a role to play. My role to play in that is trying not to get sick. It's trying to be a healthier person. It's when I do get sick, trying to interface with the people who are helping me in a more helpful and engaged way. And I think there's better outcomes there. That was a really long-winded way of trying to discuss this idea of healthy skepticism. But Becoming an active, engaged, compassionate, and open participant in everything you interface with, in my experience, leads to better outcomes. And in the experience of people that I've directly worked with in that medical environment and in these content environments as well. Approaching things in that way with this idea of healthy skepticism, I think, is extremely important. Interestingly enough, almost as if I planned it, those two themes actually interlink really well. Healthy skepticism requires a level of awareness. It requires a level of openness. It requires a level of being, as Brian likes to say. It requires an ability to step back into yourself or out of yourself, to understand other people's perspectives, to understand your perspective. And as I'm always harping on about, a great way to do that is to try and develop more space in your life, to try and minimize or limit or reduce the amount of input and stimulus we have, the amount of messages we have that are trying to direct our life and pull our strings. If we can reduce, not eliminate, but reduce those things within practical limits, we're going to be able to approach more of the situations I outlined there with this curiosity, with this healthy skepticism. But being able to create that space can be challenging. And meditation, I have found now, recently, only very recently, is one of those tools that can be very effective for that, because it just helps you to understand and to feel and to turn in to your mind and to yourself a little bit more, to tune into yourself. And when you tune into yourself, you'll have a little bit more comfort when you approach these situations, when you're interfacing with these people, whether it's your mechanic or your doctor or your financial advisor. You're not going to feel so vulnerable and helpless in those situations, even when you're not well or you're struggling with something. You're going to be a little bit more comfortable in how you think and how you'd like to do or engage in the process. But that only comes when you've been able to have a little bit of space. And I know a lot of these things are I suppose, I won't say they're privileges, but they are things that are more readily available to those of us who have a little bit of time and who have a little bit of flexibility within our lives to find that space. I know there's a lot of people who might be listening who it just seems impossible to be able to develop some sort of critical analysis filter like this for information, or to interface with things in a certain way, or to create, or to get 10 minutes a day for meditation, or to have lunch with Adam Starr. But that's kind of a separate conversation. If this sounds like something that's intriguing to you, if you want to be the type of person who feels like you have a neutral, balanced approach with your own biases, and that's fine, your own experience, your own filter, when it comes to insert issue here, politics, society, culture, religion, medicine, whatever it is, if you want to be that type of person, I think there's practice required, because it, in my experience, it doesn't just happen. It definitely doesn't happen for me naturally. And most people I speak to, it doesn't happen naturally, because we don't live in this vacuum, this neutral world where we're just existing. We're constantly pushed and pulled and tugged. And over time, we develop those biases just through what we're consuming, or who we spend our time with, or where we came from, or how we grew up, or experiences, or our traumas, whatever it might be. So I do think an active process or active practices such as meditation, or developing a deeper understanding of what you're curious about and how you'd like to engage with people. I think those things are important to practice and to integrate and to build in. They don't happen overnight. I think they're forever things. I think they're things that just maintain us, enhance us, help us grow, challenge us, help us understand ourselves, develop self-awareness. All of these things are outcomes and are pitched to us as solutions for life's problems. But there's underlying practices, and the tips I shared about I don't know, I'm banging on about medication here, but the tips I shared about meditation are actionable steps I was able to take to help me with the practice that has now helped me even further develop a little bit more awareness around my mind and how I operate and how I interface. And the more I do this, by the way, just a little share to wrap all this up, the more I do this, the more I realize how much I am completely led by the nose, by emotions, by reactivity, by bias in my life. So by saying all of this, what I am saying to you is, this is helping me uncover all the ways I am currently biased. If you listen to my show, you know I have biases. If you listen to this episode, you know I have biases. This is helping me uncover those biases. Some of them I'm completely comfortable with. Some of them I've thought about. I'm like, okay, well, this is a bias, but it's based on real life experience here, and I'm quite comfortable with it. And others, I'm like, I think I was actually a little bit off with how I was thinking about that. The how, not necessarily the what maybe, but sometimes the how. Or maybe I was carrying some judgment there, or maybe. So that's ultimately what I'm saying here. This is not me from the ivory tower saying, "Jesus, guys, be like me." It's an exploration of areas I feel have shone a light into parts of my mind, and now I have some tools that I can do more of that and work on what I find. So that's ultimately what I wanted to share today. That's all I got. That was significantly longer than I thought it was going to be. I actually quite enjoyed that. Hope you enjoyed it too. If there are any topics to come up in these episodes that you're interested in, if there's anything you'd like to discuss, sometimes I feel like people, when we put content out into the world, I actually found I found this firsthand. I am just some guy sharing my thoughts on a microphone and putting it out there. If you'd like to have conversations around these topics, if you'd like to give feedback, if you'd like to interface in some way, obviously there's practical considerations here. Sometimes you do get a lot of messages and things, not saying I get thousands of DMs or emails or anything like that, but sometimes you do get a lot of messages and it's hard to engage with those at the level you really want it in a deep way. But do feel free if you want to have a chat about things, and if there's like appropriate spaces or ways we can have discussions and things like that, do reach out. I love to hear your feedback. I love to hear if you're actually gaining things from these episodes. What I do find quite a lot is when I meet people in person, it transpires that, look, when I look at numbers of listeners on podcasts and stuff, it kind of doesn't mean a whole lot. But when you meet people in the real world, which I do very regularly, meet people who listen to the show and they'll give me a piece of feedback or something. I'm like, wow, they actually took this and they interpreted it this way and they gave me some feedback on that. That's really interesting how they consume this content and information. Absolutely love it. So please do feel free, share your feedback. I know I say this in every episode, but if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, watching on YouTube, do subscribe to the channel. It means you never miss an episode, but it really helps with the growth of the show. It lets us know that you're interested, that you're listening, and that you like what we're doing. Any questions, feel free to reach out, drop me a DM, and if I see you in the street, feel free to say hello. Sounds like I'm talking to millions of people here. I'm absolutely not. But yeah, feel free to say hello, and if there's stuff you'd like to discuss, or if there's anything you'd like me to go through with guests or in these solo episodes, do just drop us a message. But most importantly, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate you giving me your time to listen to this. If I'm in your ears, or if I'm on your screen, or whatever it is, I'm very, very grateful. This is huge for me to be able to do this. I really enjoy it, but the most fun is when I hear from you guys, and to see people listening and watching is incredible. So thank you once again. We'll see you in the next one.